What is going to happen in the 2022 NFL season? You're about to find out. All right, welcome back, folks. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and today I'm going to be dropping my 2022 NFL season projections. Before I get into it, be sure to hit that thumbs up if you do enjoy this video and you enjoy other videos. And on top of that, if you enjoy this channel but have yet to do it, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. So let's dive into it. We'll start off with the AFC, and I do think it is going to be a little interesting here, although I only have one team making the playoffs from the AFC East, and that is going to be the Buffalo Bills. I understand for you Jets fans out there that do follow the channel, and as you know, I do cover the Jets. That's a bummer to you, but hear me out when I say this. I think it's going to be a good season for the New York Jets. I have them winning 9 games this year, going 9-8. I have the New England Patriots going 8-9, and the Miami Dolphins going 5-12. I am not sold on the Miami Dolphins. I do think that McDaniel is going to have something moving forward, and they're going to be a good team at some point. But I don't think you automatically get Tyreek Hill, and it makes you just great right off the rip. I'm not convinced on Tua Tagovailoa. I'm not even convinced he's going to finish the season. I think you can look. I mean, I know Skylar Thompson played well in preseason, and is a rookie, so I wouldn't necessarily put him in the driver's seat, although who knows. But Teddy Bridgewater's on this roster, and I would not be surprised if he ends up getting the starting nod by the end of the year. That doesn't mean that the Dolphins won't be competitive, and I do think their defense is pretty solid, but you have to keep in mind that Byron Jones is banged up to start the season. I think he's one of the better corners when healthy in the league, and I do think that's going to hurt, but ultimately it just really comes down to Tua Tagovailoa. I'm not sold on him as a quarterback in the NFL, and so for that reason, I have them going 5-12. You look at the Jets, obviously I've made it very clear, I believe if they stay healthy, they are going to be in the thick of things here. I do have them coming in 10th in the AFC as a whole. There's going to be 10 total teams that I think have an above 500 record. So, the Jets, it'll be a good thing there. But with the Bills, though, I just think the Bills are the best team in the AFC. I think there's a really close team that I'm going to bring up shortly. But I just think the Bills are the best team. They're going to start off the season with a banged up Tre'Davious White. He is not fully healthy yet. So we'll see. I do think that secondary is a little bit of a weakness for them, but I just think they have the best quarterback in the league in Josh Allen, who I ultimately do believe will win the MVP. I'll get to the awards at the end, but I just think Josh Allen is going to help this team big time. They have a solid offensive line. They added James Cook in the offseason. I think that only made him better, having a more explosive running back option. On top of that, I think Gabe Davis is going to be in for a huge year for the Bills. So definitely look out for the Bills. They come in 13-4, 5-1 in the division, and number 1 in the AFC. We move on to the AFC North here. Very good division, at least the 3 teams. I'm not sold on the Browns. I think they got talent, but I think quarterback is everything, and this is a tough league. We saw the Lions lost 7 one-possession games last year. I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns are in that category. I have them having a abysmal 3-14 record. I think it's going to take a toll not having Deshaun Watson or Baker Mayfield, and I really do think that's going to sting. I like Jacoby Brissett, but I'm not sold on Brissett, especially not as a starter at this point in his career. So I just don't like the Browns here. We move up 3rd place for the AFC North. I went with the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, that Super Bowl Cincinnati Bengals team. I think they got better on the offensive line. They definitely got better, but I think the rest of the league got a little bit better, especially the Ravens, who are now healthier than they were last year. When I look at the Bengals, I still see a playoff team, and I see a team sneaking into the playoffs here, but not really fair to say sneaking. I have them winning 11 games, going 11-6, and coming in 3rd. That means next up I have the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 2 in the division. I have them coming in 11-6, having the tiebreaker. I don't care if it's Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. I think they have a lot of weapons there. Big fan of George Pickens. I'll get to that at the end with the awards. But, big fan of what Pickens can do. They have Deontay Johnson. I think Pat Freiermuth is going to be in for a good year. The offensive line, of course, is going to be a little bit of a concern, no doubt. But I love that defense. I think that defense is going to be a problem come postseason time. So this is a team I think could win the division, but I have them second place in the AFC North. In addition to that, I have the first place AFC North team going to the Ravens. Look, last year they didn't make the playoffs. They went through a myriad of injuries. You talk about the entire running back room, the cornerback room, Lamar Jackson. It was a banged up mess last year for the Ravens. Well, this year they come back and they go 12-5, and I think they win the division. I think when you look at everything they bring to the table, it's really not hard to see why this team could be really good. And I think a guy that could go nuclear this year is Rashad Bateman. I think he's finally coming into his own. I think this will be the year where he really blows up. You have Mark Andrews already. He'll generate double coverage. I really like what they did with the running backs. Gus Edwards is still on the injured list, and so you go out, you get Kenyon Drake to kind of bolster that room. J.K. Dobbins is coming back from an injury, so I do like their running backs there. And then their defense, going out and adding Kyle Hamilton, whether he has a significant role or not, I really do like the defense as it is. So the Ravens are just a team. I think they're going to be well coached, as always, with John Harbaugh. I have a hard time giving them many losses on the schedule. So I settled at 12-5 here, just a tick below the Buffalo Bills for second place in the AFC. We move on here, and this is the dogfight. I understand it sounds a little weird, right? No, not a first team and not the second place team in the AFC is coming from the AFC West. We've heard so many great things about it going into this year. Everyone is talking about the AFC West and how dominant they are. And when I went through and I picked all the games, I'm not going to lie to you. I think the issue with the AFC West is that they're going to beat the crap out of each other. I came away with the last place team being the Denver Broncos going 8-9. I think they have a tough schedule. I think they're getting a little bit overrated. I'm not convinced. I know Russell Wilson just got paid a big deal of money, but I'm not convinced that Russell Wilson is going to be Russell Wilson of old. I do think that he had some of the blame last year that was on him. That wasn't just what was around him. Plus, he had a really good running game last year for Seattle. So I'm not convinced on Russell Wilson. I don't love the weapons there. I know a lot of people do. I'm not sold on Jerry Jeudy. He did not have a good year last year. And ultimately, I think trading away Noah Fant might actually hurt them more than it helps them. Obviously, they got Russell Wilson, so it'll help them, but I do think that's going to hurt. You look at the defense, I think it's a good defense. It's going to have Coach Ejiro Evero over from the Rams coming over, so that's going to help their defense, I do think. But at the end of the day, I think they're going to lose some games, and I think they're going to lose enough where they go not only miss the playoffs, but they'll come in last place in this division, and I have them going 8-9. I don't think they're a bad 8-9 team. I think they're closer to a 10-7 team, but they're going to lose a couple close games. Plus, they have games against, the Chiefs twice, the Chargers twice, the Raiders twice. They got to go up against the Rams. I just think it's going to be really tough for them, and so I have them going 8-9 here. Next up on the list, another team missing the playoffs. That's right, only two teams I have making the playoffs from the AFC West, and the team I have missing the playoffs in addition to Denver is actually going to have a winning record. I have the Raiders at 10-7. I really like the job that they did. They went out and they got Devontae Adams. They're clearing house of basically the previous regime. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm not going to hate on it. I like the job that the Raiders did. They went out and they got Chandler Jones. A lot of people forget because he got hurt, but Chandler Jones was on a ridiculous pace to start the season last year. I think he's going to be a lot better being around a guy like Max Crosby. He's already one of the better pass rushers in football. So while I do like where they're going, I know they'll get Darren Waller paid and they'll have plenty of weapons for Derek Carr. I'm just not convinced that this team is necessarily, the top like I initially expected. When I went through and I did a quick gander at the rosters coming in the year, I kind of felt like the Raiders were the best team in this division, but now I've kind of, stepped back a little bit, going through the games. I have them at 10-7, good enough to make the playoffs in most cases, but not good enough to make the playoffs this year. So I have them coming in 8th in the AFC, just outside of that playoff picture. And now we move on to the division AFC South. And look, the AFC South could have two teams, could have only one team. I decided to go with one team. We're going to start off here. I think the worst team in the AFC, you know where I'm going here. I think it's going to be the Houston Texans. Unfortunately, I think they're going to be competitive, but I don't think they're going to win games. I don't think they're going to finish games. I think, unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of the position they put Lovie Smith in to essentially be a placeholder because we all know they want to hire Josh McCown. So I'm not the biggest fan of how they're just using him for 1 year and just basically are going to tank. Either going to get Bryce Young or CJ Stroud next year in the draft, but it's not really up for me to decide. I'm just talking about the projections. And so ultimately, I think this Texans team just is going to have a hard time winning games. I think Dameon Pierce is going to be one of the bright spots. I think Brandon Cooks is as well. I do like what they did yesterday on the waiver wire. I do like that they picked up Tyler Johnson, but I hate to break it to you, the Texans just aren't going to win football games this year. They're going to win a few, and I have them winning two, but they're a couple rather, but they're not going to win a bunch. And so I have them going 2-15. And once again, being in play for the number one spot, I do have them actually getting in the number one pick this year in the draft. Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think Jacksonville has a good defense, but I'm not sold on Trevor Lawrence, and I'm not entirely sold on this offense winning games. I think they can compete. Again, I think Doug Peterson's going to help them, but I just don't really like Jacksonville the way I like other teams in this particular conference. And so for that reason, I have them only winning 3 games this year, going 3-14. So unfortunately, not quite the season that they would want, but that's kind of how I see this going. In addition to that, I have the Tennessee Titans going 10-7 and missing the playoffs. I understand this is a good roster. I really like what they did going out and getting Robert Woods for literally nothing. They go out and they draft Treylon Burks, and you do have Ryan Tannehill there, who's obviously a solid quarterback at the very least. Although I think a lot of people are going to be calling for Malik Willis and get a little impatient there. Maybe not this year, but soon. And you're also going to have Derrick Henry. But keep this in mind. This team, last year they made the playoffs. Yes, okay. But they didn't make any giant moves. They did some good things, but we saw a lot of teams copy what the Rams did, going out and getting Matthew Stafford and trying to make big-time moves. The Robert Woods move I thought was big-time, but they did trade away A.J. Brown, which I do ultimately think that made him kind of worse. I like that Derrick Henry's back. I like their defense, although they're going to lose Harold Landry for the entire season due to a torn ACL. I'm going to dock them some points in that regard, but I do have them winning 10 games. So it's not like it's a bad year. I'm going 5-1 in the division. I think the Colts and Titans are just going to bully Houston and Jacksonville. But ultimately, I think the Colts are the better team in this division. That's why they come number one here, 4th in the order, for the playoffs. I just think Indy did it the right way. They have a lot of talent. Really like what Chris Ballard did, going out and getting Alec Pierce, going out and getting Matt Ryan. I think this was already a very good football team. The offensive line's really the only question mark I have because it's not as potent as years past. But when you look at it, though, Matt Ryan's got weapons and Pittman and Pierce and Paris Campbell if he develops. Obviously, you look at Jonathan Taylor and what he's been able to do in this league. Nyheim Hines. I really like where the Colts are right now, and I think going out and getting Matt Ryan might not have been the sexy maneuver, not getting a new franchise quarterback. I think it was the low-key Matthew Stafford pickup of the offseason. So credit to Chris Ballard, credit to the Colts, and I do think that ends up landing them in the playoffs and winning that division because of it. All right, and we move on to the NFC here. We're going to start with the NFC West, and starting at the bottom, I have changed my tune on this, so if you go back and you see my other podcasts and such, I was wrong. I got to walk it back here. The Seahawks went out and they decided to make Geno Smith the starter. I was a little excited for Drew Lock. Not excited, but I wanted to see him get an opportunity. I felt like he could have done more. Plus, they have a really good running back room. They have a really good run-blocking offensive line, a running game-minded offensive line. And so I felt like that was definitely going to help them. But really, when I came down to it, I went through the games. I just was a little too high in Seattle. They're not better than Arizona, although they're not much worse than Arizona. I have them going 5-12, 2-4 in this division. I think they'll steal a game from the 49ers. I think they'll steal a game from Arizona. But when you look at it, Seattle has some good pieces, but they're simply just not built to win this year, and that's okay. They're going to be fine. They're going to turn it around. I mean, they are that team that is hard to really get rid of, and so the 5-12, yeah, it's not ideal, but at the same time, I think that they're going to be somewhat competitive because of that run game. I think it's going to keep them in games. They might not win those games, but they're a team that you probably don't want to play later on in the season. If Drew Lock takes over, or if Geno Smith gets into a rhythm. I know that sounds kind of funny to say, but they could be, annoying. So 5-12 here, obviously don't make the playoffs. They come in 12th in the NFC. We move on, Arizona. So the Arizona Cardinals. Truth time, you're not going to have DeAndre Hopkins for the first close to half the season, and I understand they added Marquise Brown. I'm not overly hyped on him. I'm not very hyped on him at all. I think, okay, Christian Kirk is gone, and, I'm just not a big fan of this Cardinals roster. I think they have some guys that, are big names, but not really living up to that. J.J. Watt's never healthy. A.J. Green can't stay healthy. I mean, he's okay. He's not the same A.J. Green we knew. So this Arizona team, Kyler Murray, we know he turns it on at the beginning of the year, struggles the second half of the year just like their coach. That's kind of where I'm going here. I think Arizona might get off to a solid start, but I have them going 7-10. I just don't think they're that good of a team. I think last year was a little fluky, and we saw them kind of fall apart. Also, on top of that, I think this Kyler Murray style of play this year is going to be well telegraphed by defenses. I think now the tendencies are out there, and I think he's going to be easier to stop. And we saw that. Even in the middle of last year, we saw teams making adjustments and making it hard for him. I don't think Kyler Murray's a bad quarterback. As a matter of fact, I think he's a great quarterback when he's at his best. I mean, he's one of the best when he's at his best. But unfortunately, I just don't think that they have proven enough down the stretch to win those games. And so I have Arizona going 7-10 here. That means I do have two teams making the NFC playoffs from the NFC West. And that second team in the NFC West is the San Francisco 49ers, and they are going 10-7. I went way lower than I initially had them at 12-5. I took 2 wins away from them when I went through and looked at all the games. I think this is a team, you have Trey Lance, who I like a lot. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I think he's going to add something they just have not had in that offense. But I'm just not convinced that Kyle Shanahan can get this job done. I'm just not. He has not done it. And yes, they might split with the Rams, and I could totally see that, but I just don't see this team taking that next step in getting over the hump and winning the Super Bowl. And I don't see them getting to the NFC title game again like I initially expected. I think they have a very good defense, and I think they have pieces on their offense. They'll be exciting, but I don't see them consistently winning throughout the postseason. And I do think a lot of what they're going to do, and while it is fairly new, and they're going to have pretty much a whole new way to have to defend this team because of Trey Lance, he is pretty much a rookie this year. So with that said, I can't have the rookie taking him too far. I think down the road, he's going to be lethal, and they're going to be a problem. But right now, I still think they're manageable. 10-7 gets them into the playoffs as the 7th seed, but I don't think they get very far as that 7th seed. That's where I have the 49ers. So that means in the NFC West, I have the LA Rams winning the division. Shocker to probably nobody. While this is, a Rams channel in addition to the Jets, I have them going 14-3. I think they're the best team, and I'm not even trying to sound biased when I say this. They are clearly the best team. When you look on paper, what they did last year, who they brought in, who they brought back, I'm sorry. I think they are the best team. I think Matthew Stafford proved it 1 year on a good roster, and he wins the Super Bowl. Now he's going to be in year 2 of this offense. You go out and you get Allen Robinson to basically rectify the biggest issue of Stafford's game, is that he gives guys too much confidence. He, gives guys too much of an opportunity, and they just didn't pan out for him last year. It resulted in 17 interceptions. So insert Allen Robinson, who is not afraid to box out defenders, play above the rim, high point the football, and be an absolute monster when the ball is up in the sky. And so I think a lot of those interceptions are going to be cut down because of it. They're going to have Cam Akers back, who they didn't have last year. And so that means they're not going to have a Sony Michel, who didn't really fit their offense. They tried to fit the offense around him when push came to shove. They will have Darrell Henderson. They're very, very excited for Kyron Williams, the 5th-round running back. Look out for him. I think he's going to have a really good year. In addition to that, you look at the defense. People are concerned because this guy and this guy and this guy left. Of course, Von Miller is a loss. I'm not going to say he's not. But what the Rams did in going out and getting Bobby Wagner, who's going to play behind Aaron Donald, he's going to mentor Ernest Jones. They go out and they get Troy Hill, an underrated move that's going to help the secondary. They draft 2 guys that are more NFL ready than you would believe, and Jacoby Durant and Darion Kendrick to bolster their cornerback room. They have 4 safeties that could start. You look at Burgess, Rapp, Fuller, and Scott. And on top of that, their pass rush is not bad. I think people forgot that Justin Hollins is a good football player, and just because they got Von Miller doesn't change the fact that he was indeed a good football player, just behind a better football player when he was acquired and he came back from injury. So, biggest issue for the Rams is offensive line. They have some, issues there. History. You have Noteboom, who has had an issue staying healthy. You have Allen, who's had an issue staying healthy, and Havenstein has dealt with injuries. If they stay healthy, I don't see how anybody's going to stop this team. Health is really the only thing that can stop the Rams, in my opinion. That's why I have them winning this division and leading the league in wins at 14-3. The NFC North is next, and while, yes, okay, we talk about the Green Bay Packers all the time. Aaron Rodgers didn't retire, and he didn't leave the Packers, so he is back. I'm not going to just do what we normally do and automatically put him as the first-place team. And yes, I said him because he really is the Packers. I don't think the Packers are a bad team by any stretch. They have a lot of great players, including Jair Alexander, who I think is the second-best cornerback in football. And I do like what they have, obviously, in that running back duo. You talk about Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. I think they're going to be an issue. But no Devontae Adams. Yes, I know fantasy football and how everybody is basically losing their mind for Allen Lazard and guys like Romeo Doubs and guys like Christian Watson. But what it really comes down to is this. I do not think that Aaron Rodgers is going to have the rapport with any of these receivers that he did with Devontae Adams last year. I just don't think that just changes overnight. I don't think that just develops overnight. I think Aaron Rodgers is fantastic, and they're going to win a lot of football games, but I don't have them winning this division. I'm actually going to start from the top this time around. I'm going to go with the Minnesota Vikings winning the NFC North division, 13-4, new coach in Kevin O'Connell, who really is a breath of fresh air for this team. They've done a really nice job. They just traded for Jalen Reagor. They just traded for Ross Blacklock. I like what they're doing, going out and getting these players, getting them opportunities, change of scenery. KJ Osborne's having a great camp. Justin Jefferson, I think, is going to be one of the most explosive offensive players in football, if not the most explosive. You have Dalvin Cook. You have Madison. You have a good offensive line that's been built through the draft. And on top of that, that defense has been built through the draft, as well as some of the guys that they're adding in Andrew Booth, Louis Cine. I really like what they did in the draft. I really like what the Vikings did in the offseason. And so I think Kirk Cousins is going to be in for his best year now in Kevin O'Connell's offense. It's going to be very similar to Sean McVay's, which is going to be very similar to what Kirk Cousins had in Washington. He's going to be comfortable. Mike Zimmer, I've always said, has held this team back. And so don't be surprised. It may not be necessarily all Kevin O'Connell, but a lot of it, I think, is going to be Kevin O'Connell and a mixture of just the fact that Mike Zimmer's gone. So I had them at 13-4. They'll be 4-2 in this division. I think they'll split with Green Bay, and I think they'll split with Detroit. And so that's how I have it. I think the Vikings are 100% the dark horse, and I've taken them all the way to winning this division here in this projection. That means number 2, 12-5. I have the Green Bay Packers, who once again, I think they'll go 4-2 as well, splitting against the Lions and the Vikings. I think they're a very good football team, but I don't think they're as good as years past. I do think not having Devontae Adams will be an issue. I understand that's something that probably a lot of media heads have been pushing, but I do think that's a legitimate concern. It's not just talking head material. It's legitimate concern that they don't have a receiver on that level. Allen Lazard could have 1,000 yards. It's absolutely possible. I would not rule it out. But I do think that that is going to have some sort of lingering effect for this Packers team. And I do think ultimately this team has been the better team in the division, but I think the Vikings always could have been a problem and really were held back by Zimmer, which ultimately will lead to them being the second team here. Number 3, I have a team that's just missing the playoffs. I can't believe I'm saying it, but when I went through this schedule, I'm like, the Lions can absolutely go in 9-8, and that's what I have them going. 3-3 in the division. I think Jared Goff has more confidence than just about ever. I think going back to 2018, 2017, I think that's where Jared Goff's at right now in the confidence. The Lions stuck to him. They didn't draft anybody. They didn't go out and say, okay, we're going to get Willis or Pickett. They told him he's the guy. They're rolling with him this year, and they're not trying to tank. They're really trying to compete. You see it with Brad Holmes and his the confidence that he instills in Jared Goff. You see it in the coach, Dan Campbell. I just think when you look at this team is going to surprise people. This is probably the easiest team to pick apart because you look at it and you're like, oh, it's the Lions and they're terrible and Stafford's gone. But if you actually watched last year, they had, 7-8 games of one possession losses. A lot of stuff can change. They add Jamison Williams. They add DJ Chark. I really like what they have now, all the weapons that they possess for Goff. They added help on the defensive side of the ball. I just really like this team, and I think that they're going to be a team you don't want to face at any point in the season, whether it's week 1 or week 18. So I have them winning 9 games, going 9-8, unfortunately missing the playoffs, but a huge building block and a huge step in the right direction for a team that, quite honestly, needs it. I do think that Jared Goff, at some point down the line, they're going to commit to him even further, and they're going to give him another contract. I think they'll stick with Goff because I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I think he lost his way. He's not Stafford, but he lost his way. He lost his confidence. But when he regains that, and he's got the talent and the weapons around him and the protection, which I do believe the Lions have, he can actually play pretty good football, and we saw that in little bits and pieces of last year. I think we'll see it again. 9-8. They missed the playoffs, but a really, really good stepping stone in the right direction for the Detroit Lions, and that unfortunately means that we have the Bears coming in last place and being the worst team in the NFC. I know it sounds a little harsh, and I know people are looking at the preseason. They saw Justin Fields throw 3 touchdowns. Hate to break it to you, but I don't think this Bears team is very good. I don't think they've done a good job of surrounding him with talent. I understand he can make the most of it, and they did just go out and get Amir Smith-Marset, which I like, but it's really just the island of misfit toys in Chicago. You already see the whole Roquan Smith thing blow up. You know at some point they're going to trade Robert Quinn away. It's just become that. And so while they have guys like Jaquan Brisker, who you have to be very excited about if you're a Chicago Bears fan, the defense is never the concern for me. The offense is. I don't love their offensive line. I don't love their weapons. And unfortunately, I think Justin Fields is a good quarterback in a bad situation and could be in for a nightmare season. I have him at 2-15 because of it. And I think they're going to be the worst team in the NFC. We move on to the NFC South, and we're going to start from the bottom here and work our way up. We're going to start with the last place team in the NFC South. It's going to be a dogfight for last place team. I think it's going to be the Atlanta Falcons. I know they played well last year, didn't really like the direction they took, and I think they expected this when they let go of Matt Ryan. A lot of people don't realize Matt Ryan was very much the reason that they won as many games as they did last year. They had no business competing on that level. They had hardly anybody in their secondary except for A.J. Terrell. It was just not a great football team. And so now I think when you look at this team, it's not awful, but I just think they're going to have a hard time finishing games. You have the weapons. Obviously, Kyle Pitts in last year's draft. This year you go out and you get Drake London. You get Bryan Edwards, who is basically the leftovers from the Raiders. I just think that this team, while they have weapons, Cordell Patterson comes back, I just don't think they're going to be finishing games. And I do think that they have some pieces that you like, but they don't have a complete team yet. And that's okay. I do think ultimately, when you look at Arthur Smith, he's going to have him on the right track. This is going to be a pretty big step back, but this is going to be more about the quarterback change and less about, how far he's come and all that. Because I do think, Marcus Mariota is not a bad player. I like him. I'm rooting for him. And honestly, I think Desmond Ridder as well could have some interesting moments this season. But ultimately, I think Matt Ryan's a lot better than people realize. And we already talked about the Colts making the playoffs because of that. I think we're going to see Matt Ryan pretty much around his best, playing his best football this year. And I think we're going to see the Falcons wishing they had him. Not hating on them trading him. It made sense. But I do think it's going to cost them some wins this season. They come in at 3-14. Third place team. I wanted Matt Rule to be good, and honestly, after everything that went down in Cleveland, I'm rooting for Baker Mayfield. But I just don't see this team doing much. I really don't. So I have the Panthers going 5-12, 2-4 in the division. I don't like Ben McAdoo as their offensive coordinator. That spells disaster for me. That honestly scares me the hell away. So I am going 5-12. You have the New Orleans Saints making the playoffs, the 6th seed here in the NFC playoffs. I have them at 10-7. I think they're going to win 5 games in this division, only losing to Tampa, which I also believe Tampa will lose to the Saints. That also means Tampa is going to be 12-5. I think the Saints are a team to look out for. Jameis Winston is going to be very much in play for comeback player of the year. I love that they stuck by him. They added some weapons. Olave is going to help over the top. I really do like the direction this team is going in, especially now that they added Jarvis Landry, a guy that can help you in between the numbers. So I like the defense. I like the offense. It was a little concerning seeing them trade away Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, although I do get it. I think they'll be okay. But I have them coming in at 10-7 and just barely making the playoffs, just like the Niners, over the Detroit Lions. And that means Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're going to win the division here. I do think they're not as good as last year. Tampa is going to have a hard time on the offensive line. Brady will not be as protected in years as he was in years past, and so I do like the addition of adding Russell Gage, and they have the weapons of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. But ultimately, I think that this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team just isn't as good as last year. And so while I do have them winning 12 games and going 12-5, I have them as the 3rd seed and not the 2nd or 1st seed because of that. But I do think they're a good football team and they'll win this division. Lastly, in the NFC, I have the NFC East here. Last place, the New York Giants. I've been very high on them in the past. I do like Brian Daboll. I'd like to see them do better, but I kind of have them at 5-12 here. I see them going 2-4 in this division. A lot of things can happen. It really is up to Saquon Barkley, I think. They need that explosion. They need that explosion out of the backfield, and Daniel Jones, of course, but I just think ultimately that they're going to lose a lot of close games, and so I had them in last place in this division. On top of that, I had the 6-11 Washington Commanders. I think Carson Wentz is going to show you bits and pieces of old Carson Wentz. I think he's had the upgrade in the receiver room. Going out and getting Jahan Dotson, I think is definitely going to help him. But I do believe that this is not quite on the level of a Philadelphia Eagles or Dallas Cowboys roster. And so for that reason, I'm going 6-11. And then next up, number 2, I have the Dallas Cowboys here, and I have them going 8-9. I think they'll go 4-2 in this division, but it's kind of like we saw last year. The Cowboys take advantage of who they play in this division. And because of last year, they're going to have a first-place schedule. I don't think that bodes well for Dallas, and because of that, I have them with a losing record, and I also have them coming in 2nd. We'll see what ends up happening with Tyron Smith, but I do think they made a mistake letting go of Lyle Collins. So I have the Dallas Cowboys at 8-9 following that. And I feel pretty good about this. I just feel like Mike McCarthy, he's probably on the hot seat if we're being honest. And this might be enough to push him out the door, even though they had a pretty good year last year. Just losing the way they did to the Niners really left a bad taste in Dallas fans' mouth, and rightfully so. But I don't think this team is better than last year, and for that reason, I do have them coming in 2nd, which isn't bad. but 9th in the NFC as a whole and missing the playoffs. No team over the last 10 years in the NFC East has repeated as the winner of the division, and I don't expect that to change here. I had the Philadelphia Eagles. Dallas won it last year. I had the Philadelphia Eagles winning this year. They're the better team. I like that they added A.J. Brown. I really like the direction they're going in, and I kind of have a little bit of a feeling that Jalen Hurts is going to make every single hater of his look really stupid this year. I could be wrong. That could be bulletin board material for the haters, but I really think Jalen Hurts gets a bunch of flack, really unnecessary, and I'm excited to see him work this year. I think the Philadelphia Eagles come in 11-6, 4th in the NFC in the playoffs, and that's how I have it going into the playoffs. Those are all of the divisions, and now we'll check out the playoffs. So the wild card round, we're going to kick this thing off. Number 5, Kansas City in the AFC is going to take down number 4, Indianapolis. I think this really comes down to experience, and while I know you have Matt Ryan here, the rest of the Colts roster, they didn't even make the playoffs last year after a bad collapse, and so I think Kansas City with that experience, they'll know what it takes to win that game. They'll win the game on the road here with Patrick Mahomes. And then moving on, I have the number 6 Pittsburgh Steelers taking down the number 3 Los Angeles Chargers. Look, it's the same deal here. Justin Herbert is the better quarterback in this game, but I do think when push comes to shove, it's going to be about experience. And the Steelers were in the playoffs last year. That defense is a playoff defense. I think Staley's first chance at winning in the playoffs is going to fall short. And so we'll get an opportunity to see the Steelers move on to the next round, unlike last year. The number 2 Baltimore Ravens shock everybody by knocking out last year's AFC champions, defending champion Cincinnati Bengals. The Ravens are out for blood this year. I really believe that Lamar Jackson is out to prove everybody wrong. He has not won much in the playoffs, and so I do think that this is going to be a year for him. The defense is healthy. Everybody's back. And so I think John Harbaugh's coaching ability and just everything that they bring to the table is going to be enough to win this game here. There's never been a 7th seed, and it's really never been really close where a 7th seed has won since they opened up 7 seeds in the playoffs. I don't see that changing here. I'll take Baltimore at home. We move to the NFC side of the wild card round, and we'll start with Green Bay taking down number 5, the Green Bay Packers taking down Philadelphia. Little unfair here. This is what happens when you have a stacked competition at the top of your division. If those two teams make it, not both of them, only one of them can be in the top 4. And so while I had Minnesota as the number 2 seed, I had the Packers as the number 5 seed because they didn't win the division in this projection. So that means they're a very good team playing against, I think, a good team in Philly. I think they're going to prove people wrong here, this season, winning a lot of games, but I don't see them getting past Green Bay. And so I'm picking Green Bay here. You have Aaron Rodgers. You have all the experience there. Philly, it's going to help. Jalen Hurts will be back in the playoff game. He'll have another game under his belt, more experience for him, but give me Green Bay in this game. On the road, I'll take Green Bay. Tampa takes down New Orleans. Number 3, Tampa Bay takes down number 6, New Orleans Saints. Look, I get it. I think the Saints have done a really nice job really getting to Tom Brady. They've had a lot of success against Tampa, but once again, I think in the playoffs, when it really matters the most, Tampa gets the job done. They move on to the divisional round of the playoffs. And then finally in this round, I have number 2 Minnesota Vikings taking down the number 7 San Francisco 49ers. I think Trey Lance offers enough to feel scared about if I'm Minnesota here, but I think at this point in the season, while he should be in a pretty good groove here, I think Minnesota is just going to be a well-oiled machine, and they are going to have no issue winning this at home in front of the giant crowd chanting "Skull" throughout the entire game. Give me Minnesota moving on to the divisional round. That means the divisional round of the playoffs, starting with the AFC. We have number 2 Baltimore taking on number 5 Kansas City, and I intend to stick with Baltimore here. I understand this sounds kind of crazy. Patrick Mahomes not in yet another Super Bowl, but that's how I have it. I think Baltimore is going to be riding high. They are a team to watch. They're not getting enough love. The health is a big deal. and I do think they're going to win. I think the equalizer with Kansas City, the thing that allowed them to really win any type of game, is having the explosion that they did in Tyreek Hill. Kind of the equalizer there. Not trying to take anything away from Kelsey or Mahomes, but I think having that speed could literally win you any game if you were in a close game. Unfortunately, not having him will hurt in this one. I'll take Baltimore in a close game to move on to the AFC Championship game. And then I have the Buffalo Bills, number 1, taking on the number 6 Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense is something to behold. I really do think they are going to have a great season. I think they're going to get to Josh Allen in this game, so they're going to need a little bit more help, and I do think the addition of James Cook and the combination of that running back room will be able to propel the Bills into the AFC title game and win a close one against Pittsburgh. I have the Bills facing the Ravens to go to the Super Bowl in the next round. And then the NFC side, I have the number 2 Minnesota Vikings taking down number 3 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady versus Kirk Cousins, exactly what you would expect. All the odds makers, all the bettors will put all their money on Tom Brady in his last year probably in the NFL. But I'll take Kirk Cousins and this new revitalized Vikings team here. I think they are going to be a problem. I think they're a team you absolutely have to watch every single week. They are going to be a lot of fun. And Justin Jefferson is going to be too much for anybody on Tampa to shut down. Give me the Vikings moving on in the NFC title game. And then on top of that, I have the Rams playing the Green Bay Packers, the number 1 Rams taking on the number 5 Green Bay Packers. The last time these two played in the playoffs, it didn't go well for the Rams. They lost 32-18. And while, yes, there's a lot of doubt here, the Rams have not been able to beat the Packers. Sean McVay can't beat Matt LaFleur. They already got one monkey off their back last year when they took down the 49ers. I believe that they would do it again here with Green Bay. I could see them losing in the regular season again to Green Bay and then getting the monkey off their back in the divisional round once again. A rematch from the 2020 playoffs. I think they'd win this time because they have Stafford, not Goff. They're a lot better team. I think the Rams are a lot better than the Packers as of right now, so I'll take the Rams to move on to the NFC title game to play the Minnesota Vikings. And that means in the championship round, we have the number 1 Buffalo Bills taking on the number 2 Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to take the Bills here for one reason. I think Josh Allen is the best quarterback in football. I think both teams are going to be pretty evenly matched, but I do think Buffalo has more weapons. I think they have the better quarterback, and I love Lamar Jackson, so it's no knock on him. But I do think ultimately that the Bills can win this game. It'll be a close one, but the Bills head on to Super Bowl 57, and they will play the team either the number 1 Rams or the number 2 Vikings. And if you guys already know, then you know. The Rams, I have knocking off the Minnesota Vikings. Originally, this was the 49ers rematch. I don't see it. I think it's going to be Rams. I think it's going to be the Vikings. It's going to be Kevin O'Connell versus Sean McVay. And while Kevin O'Connell has a monumental season and brings the Vikings, breathes life into them on a whole other level, a whole other scale, I just think it's too hard this time around to beat the defending champions. And so I think the Vikings will fall short here. The Rams will move on to Super Bowl 57 to potentially become the first back-to-back champion since the 2004 Patriots. And they will play the Buffalo Bills, a rematch of Week 1, which we will see next week. Week 1 of the NFL season kicks off. Rams, Bills. And I said it before, I'll say it again, that was the Super Bowl preview. Does not matter who wins that game. I have the Rams taking it whole. I think there's going to be a lot of people thinking, Allen, Von Miller, the Bills are really going to be trending, and I think they will be the favorite in that game, just like how a lot of people started trying to bet on the Bengals, and the Bengals all of a sudden started getting a lot of love. I think the Bills will get a lot of love. But once again, Matthew Stafford in a Super Bowl comes through, wins another Super Bowl back-to-back seasons, and that's all she wrote. So I have the Rams winning Super Bowl 57, taking down the Bills. I don't pick them to win the Super Bowl much, but apparently when I do, they do, because last year I predicted that they'd take down the Los Angeles Chargers, and while I was wrong about the Chargers even being in the playoffs, the Rams did win Super Bowl 56 like I predicted. Who do you have? Let me know below. But before we end this thing, I'm going to get into the awards. All right, so Super Bowl MVP is going to Matthew Stafford. I'm saying it now because it should have been Matthew Stafford this past year. He's the only quarterback in NFL history to throw 3 touchdowns, win the Super Bowl, and not win the Super Bowl MVP. It's no knock on Kupp, but we all know why Stafford didn't win Super Bowl MVP. It was those 2 interceptions, and even if he didn't throw those 2 interceptions, there would have been something out there because a lot of people don't want to admit that they were wrong about him. So here we are. Stafford wins Super Bowl MVP. The MVP of the regular season, I'm giving to Josh Allen. I think when you look at this Bills team, they're probably not a 13-win team on paper. They're probably like a 12-11 team. I think he takes them up a notch. I think this is a very good team, and they're the best team in the AFC, but I keep going back to the reason I think that being Josh Allen. I think there's a chance that the Ravens are the best team in the AFC, put together, compiled. Even when you have, Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen, maybe entirely the Ravens are the more complete team, but Josh Allen is the better quarterback, and I think he's that much better than everyone else that he can push this team to the Super Bowl. So I picked Josh Allen to be the MVP, although I think it'll be a close race between him, Kirk Cousins, and Matthew Stafford, as well as Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady will all be in there. Justin Jefferson, Allen Robinson, and Cooper Kupp. I expect all those guys to be in play for MVP. We all know that it's a quarterback award now, so I won't get too much into that. But that's how I have that. Speaking of which, Offensive Player of the Year is not going to a Ram. It's going to the Minnesota Vikings wide receiver, Justin Jefferson. I have Allen Robinson leading the league in receiving, and I do think Cooper Kupp is going to have a fantastic year as well. But I think Justin Jefferson is going to be combined a little bit lower on the receiving yards end, a lot more receptions, and a lot more touchdowns. Justin Jefferson is going to be like what we saw Cooper Kupp was last year. Not on that level, but he's going to be very explosive, and he's going to be a huge reason why the Vikings and Kirk Cousins have the season that they have, winning 13 games in 2022. Next up, I have Aaron Donald winning the Defensive Player of the Year award for the 4th time. He should have probably won it last year, but I'm not going to make a big deal about it because I do think TJ Watt was deserving at that point. But Aaron Donald is going to have another great season if the Rams do want to get back to the Super Bowl. He can't just have an okay year. He's going to have a Donald year. Now, is it better than years past? Who knows? But I do think they'll give it to him this year. So I'm going to go with Aaron Donald with the Defensive Player of the Year award projection there. Offensive Rookie of the Year was a little tough for me. I wanted to say Kenny Pickett here because I do think the Steelers might have him as the starter at some point later on the year and taking over and really having a great year. But I went with the guy who's going to be there the whole year, and that is George Pickens. I think he's going to have a monster season. I think there are better receivers out there. I think Jamison Williams has a better ceiling, and I do think when you look over in New York with the Jets, in Garrett Wilson, he's going to have a great year, but Pickens is 1,000-yard, 10-touchdown penciled in for me. I think he's going to have a really good year for Pittsburgh, and I think he's going to help whoever throws the ball, whether it's Pickett or Trubisky. I think he's going to be a big reason why the Steelers are able to win a few games and get to the postseason and get onto the divisional round of the postseason. So I have Pickens winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. I'm really high on Sauce Gardner. I think he's going to be fantastic this year for the New York Jets. Like on the level of Jair Alexander, Darrelle Revis, Jalen Ramsey. Like, I think this is the next star in the NFL at corner. But with that said, I think Aiden Hutchinson is going to get more love. He was a higher pick. He's a guy that is already getting a lot of attention. Plus, the sack numbers are going to stand out like a sore thumb. I think he's going to be in for a really good year. I have the Lions winning 9 games and the Jets, so I think it's really close. I'm splitting hairs, but I'll go with the pass rusher because I think you see more flashiness. You see the sacks are on the highlights and everything. I don't think Sauce Gardner's going to have a ton of interceptions. I think he could have a bunch, but I don't expect that. I think he's going to have probably around 3 or 4. It's going to be more so, big time, fun tape to watch, a guy that can shut down guys. but I don't think he's going to get the love from the casual viewer, and I think it's going to push a lot of people in the Aiden Hutchinson camp. So I'll pick Aiden Hutchinson here. They're both deserving, I think, at the end of the year, but I'm going to go with Aiden Hutchinson as the guy that ends up winning this. Comeback Player of the Year is a no-brainer, right? I mean, I know you have Christian McCaffrey who's back, but I have the Panthers going 5-12. You have other guys, of course, but there is nobody that is even close, in my opinion, than Jameis Winston. Winston in this scenario has led his team to the playoffs coming back from a torn ACL. We saw what he could do last year. He had 5 touchdowns in a game and really didn't get much of a chance to really expand on that. And because of that, the Saints did unfortunately miss the playoffs last year. However, I do think that Jameis Winston and this new wide receiver room, potentially also having a Michael Thomas back, is going to be massive. And I think that the Saints are going to win enough games to get to the playoffs, and they're going to be a team to look out for. I didn't have them going as far, but I'm not going to say they won't. So I definitely have Comeback Player of the Year, the quarterback that comes back from the torn ACL and leads his team to a playoff berth. Give me Jameis Winston for Comeback Player of the Year. And that means the final award here is going to go to the Coach of the Year, which obviously in this scenario, there's only one option here, and it has to be Kevin O'Connell, who takes the Vikings out of nowhere and puts them as the number 2 team in the NFC, brings them to an NFC championship game, falls short of the Super Bowl, but all in his first season. I think Kevin O'Connell wins the Coach of the Year award, going 13-4, and so that is how I have it. So in conclusion, I have the Rams winning the Super Bowl, taking down the Buffalo Bills, and I think it's going to be a fantastic Super Bowl. The Rams move on, win Super Bowl number 3, championship number 5, and they're back-to-back Super Bowl. The first team to do that since the New England Patriots in 2004. If you guys enjoyed this, please be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, I'm Jake Ellenbogen. We'll check back on this later on in the season. But until next time, you guys take care. Later.